I was setting up my new Japanese chisels and thought, while I do so, I would share their interesting and, quite honestly, badass history and why they are held in such high esteem within the woodworking community. This is actually the very first time I personally have set up a new set of chisels, so I was feeling a bit intimidated by the process. After watching lots of videos on here covering proper setup, I felt confident enough to give it a go myself. Weirdo. It's got the zoomies. Normally I don't really have Augie out here, but since I'm just sharpening the Japanese chisels and they're up on the workbench where he cannot reach them, I thought it could keep me some company. Okay, stop distracting me. Lately, I have been getting more and more interested in Japanese-style joinery and tools, and I wanted to better understand what made tools like the Japanese chisel so beloved. As I did some research, I discovered the history of its development and usage throughout time was far more fascinating than I could have imagined. By the way, most of the information I'll be sharing comes from the book Japanese Woodworking Tools, Their Tradition, Spirit, and Use by Toshio Odate, but I'll list any additional sources in the description. The chisel is a rather ancient tool, especially when compared to tools like the plane and the saw. Early chisels were made of stone rather than metal, and the blade shape has evolved, but beyond that, very little has changed since it first appeared in Japanese society. Early chisel's cutting edge was curved and beveled on both sides like the modern axe. The chisel's cutting edge was curved like this, since this was the time before ripsaws, so that lumber could be milled through splitting with large chisels and wedges. For the purpose of splitting wood and ease of sharpening, a double beveled and curved chisel allowed greater control than a single beveled, non-curved one. To start the setup for these contemporary Japanese chisels, you are supposed to set the hoop. The hoop is properly set when the top of the wooden handle is mushroomed over the metal hoop, so that the wood has a slight protruding dome shape. I won't break down the setup process in detail, but I will link a few videos in my description that do. With the introduction of ripsaws, chisels evolved into tools for doing finer, more accurate work. Today, all chisels, except those used in wood carving and making woodcuts, are beveled on one side. Now, this is where the history of these chisels starts to get really interesting. Scholars believe that some swordsmiths who forged the swords and spears of the samurai turned to make chisels and plain blades at the end of the samurai period. During the days of the samurai, swordsmiths were the most highly respected craftsmen. They, along with the samurai warriors, were the only people allowed to carry such swords. However, when samurai were outlawed by the government at the beginning of the Meiji era in the latter part of the 19th century, the skills of the swordsmith were no longer demanded by Japanese society and the profession started to die out. The art of samurai swordmaking was nearly lost as Japan began to quickly modernize. The first step in sharpening a new chisel is called lapping the back, which basically means grinding down the flat side of the chisel on a flat surface like a water stone using the slurry produced by adding water to the stone, starting on a 1000 grit stone. I am using a couple of water stones to lap the back of my chisels, but you can use other means as well. You want to keep removing material until the back is perfectly flat, which will be evident when you have a consistent finish across the entire back. If you do use water stones, you need to ensure your stone is actually flat, as it will develop dips if you use it enough. You can ensure this by sanding it down periodically on a perfectly flat surface like a piece of glass, or in my case, a slab of granite. You can also use diamond stones, as those will not wear away like water stones do. But back to our samurai swordsmiths. Luckily, the advanced technology of sword forging was not lost, and many brought the skills and techniques they had cultivated forging swords to the making of tools like chisels. This heritage is one of the reasons that Japanese chisels are globally renowned even to this day for being of such high quality. Man, my hands and especially my wrists are very sore right now. I knew it was going to be pretty tedious doing all of that grinding on the water stones, but it was even more tedious than I expected. I just finished lapping all the backs of my full set of chisels. Since my wrists are really feeling it, I think I'm going to take a break and then I'll come back to this to finish up the bevels on the other side another day after work this week. But yeah, time for some hand stretches. Lapping the back of all the chisels took a while, but now it is finally time to sharpen the bevel of the chisel. Unlike a Western chisel, the edge of a Japanese chisel is twin layered with a hard steel cutting layer that is supported by a softer steel. This means the edge of the Japanese chisel can be sharpened to a higher degree compared to its Western counterpart. Mixing the two is the perfect combination to achieve the highest level of strength and sharpness for this chisel. For those of you familiar with the process of samurai sword making, I'm guessing you're starting to see what technology and techniques the ancient Japanese swordsmiths brought to chisels. For the rest of you, a full breakdown of the forging process is much more complex, but I'll provide a simple and quick summary. Samurai swords are forged with the highest quality materials, with the sword being made of a hard, high-carbon steel and a softer, low-carbon steel. The high-carbon, harder steel forms the sword's outer shell and is what gives the sword an incredibly sharp blade, while the softer, low-carbon steel serves as the sword's core. This combination allows the sword to be incredibly durable but also deadly sharp. That Japanese technology, learned through centuries of sword making and brought into woodworking tools, is what makes the Japanese chisel so special. Since this is my first time attempting to sharpen these chisels, it'll take some practice with sharpening and usage before I'm able to get mine scary sharp and use them to their full potential. But I'm excited to begin my journey of learning to truly harness these ancient and extremely effective tools. Real quick, I want to let you guys know that I have set up a Patreon. There's a couple of tiers, and depending on what tier you choose, I will be sharing digital assets from my projects, stuff like templates and guides for pieces I make, and I'll share any other resources I find to be helpful for other woodworkers and makers. I also plan to post Patreon-only behind-the-scenes content and occasional bonus videos. I'll include a link in my description, and there's also a link in my channel profile. This is just for the people who are interested, and it's a great way to support me, but also a great way to support me is just watching these videos, throwing in a like or a comment. So this is just a bonus thing if you love what I do and want to support me making more content. Thanks for following along, and hope you think about the ancient and powerful samurai sword next time you pick up a Japanese chisel.